So welcome everyone. And people used to say there's no I in team. And I think that's no longer the case. There is an I in team because there are individuals in your team who have more influence than ever before. They're innovative, they're inspirational, they are inspired. And in fact, if anything, the eyes in your team are really the things that are going to make it different and help you be fit for the future. So today I want to talk about what's changed in teams and specifically how to get more from your team. So I know there are people here who've got different size teams. You may be um, managing teams in large organizations. You may be individual business owners who've got teams of freelancers. You may have part-time, full-time members in your team, but this is all relevant. So just to put this in context, in my book, The Future of Leadership, and when I talk about leadership in the future, I talk about it at three levels. So first of all, I want you to be a leader that they want to follow. Second, build a team around you that they want to be a part of, and then reach out to a world that wants to help. And very much today's webinar is about this middle level. So it's about the team that you're building around you, and it's going to be about what sort of team do they want to join, and also what sort of team do they want to stay in, and what sort of team do they want to build themselves. So here's a quick overview. I'm going to talk about four things today, and four concepts, but they're all related. So the first one is, how do you keep the best people in your team? And that's really about what modern employees are looking for in a workplace. And then how do you motivate them? So what sort of things motivate them? How do you ensure that you can accelerate the experience curve with learning and development? And how do you get them to achieve more? And this is not about productivity. It's about how to get more from the team members in the way that you deal with them. So they're all related. And this first area, I'm going to share with you 6 principles to keep the best people in your team. And those follow through to the other 3 as well, as you will see. Okay, so as I said, teams are different nowadays, and I'm just going to show you an example here. One of the services that I offer is Business Book in a Box, where we help people who want to be published authors write their books. So we'll actually do a lot of the writing for them. If you're interested, you can go to businessbookinabox.com and find out about that. I don't want to spend a lot of time on that. In fact, nothing more about the project itself or the product, but I want to share with you how teams are different now. So I'm based in Perth, Australia, but the team that I work with to build Business Book in a Box is around the world. So after I do interviews, that gets transcribed, and I've got 2 transcribers, one in Sri Lanka, where I was born, and the other one in Romania. Then I've got writers in South Africa and Australia. And then when we get to actually doing the graphic design, I've got designers in Canada and in Prague. And then the proofreading, I do some of the proofreading, and I've got a proofreader here in Perth as well. In fact, the other proofreader in Perth is my dad, my 78-year-old dad, who's a retired accountant, but he's got very strong English language skills. And as most accountants do, he's got a very good attention to detail. And he's just started a new career as a proofreader. So that's just an example of how teams have changed now. So where in the world is your team? What does your team look like? So I'm going to share a poll here, and it's going to ask you, where in the world is your team? And I'm talking about not you, but the rest of your team. So you've got team members elsewhere. Where are they? So you should see the poll coming up on your screen now, and you can tick more than one of the boxes. So broadly, the 4 options that you've got there are, do you have other people who work in the same office as you, which is like full-time, like all the time? Do you have people who are sometimes in the office and sometimes not? So there might be telecommuters. Do you have people who work in a team, but the team's in a remote office? Or do you have people who work independently, who never come into the office? Or do you have some other? And if you've got other, I'd be interested to know. So if you could just type in the question box what that other would be, and I'll just read that out. Okay, thank you for voting quickly. I'll leave the polls open for another 5 seconds or so, and then I'll show the results. Oh, okay, almost everyone's voted. Perfect. Okay, so let's see what we've got. Okay, and obviously this isn't going to add up to 100% because you can tick more than one. Okay, so really interesting to see that a lot of people have team members who work independently, like I do. And in fact, for me, all my team members are working independently, so I would tick that box and that box alone. But is it really interesting to see that we've got people who've got team members who work in the same office as them some of the time, and even sometimes work in a remote office. So lots of people have team members who still work in offices. It's just that they may not be 100% in your office. Okay, so let's see. comments that came in. So yeah, independent professionals with no formal connection to myself. Yeah, okay, great. Yep. Okay, thanks everyone. So let's look at this first area, which is going to be the foundation of everything else that we talk about in this webinar. So the first area is this. So what do employees want? And if you know what they want and you can give it to them, then that's the way that you keep the best. So that should logically follow. And one of my clients, one of my consulting clients, is a CEO of an organization here in Perth. She says that I interviewed her and she says this: didn't you employ knowledge workers for their knowledge? And that, in a nutshell, is what people are looking for. They're looking for you now to take advantage of their talent, their skills, their outside interest, their knowledge, their expertise, and their experience. Even the youngest team members and the most junior have things to share. So the Gallup organization did some research into what employees wanted and from their workplaces. And these are 6 things they came up with. Now, I'm not going to keep this slide up for long, and I suggest that you don't write these things down, but you can look at them. They're looking for benefits, they're looking for job security, they're looking for good holidays, they're looking for things like this, but that research was done a generation ago. And what people want from the workplace now has changed. And Harvard did some recent research, and they came up with their 6 things, which is what they call the best workplace on earth. So you can read it in Harvard Business Review if you want to read the article in detail, or you can Google it. You can find a free version of it online. But here are the 6 things in brief. So here are the 6 things that make up the best workplace on earth based on what employees want. The first thing is recognize my identity. Let me be myself. Then tell me what's really going on, not just in my job, but in the organization as a whole, so that I can help out. Discover and magnify my strengths. This is all about talents, my skills. Find out what they are and help me grow them. Give me a place where I can say I feel proud to work here. And on a day-to-day basis, give me work that's meaningful, not just menial. And the last thing is, I know that I need to have certain policies and rules and processes, but don't get in the way, don't let them get in the way of me doing some good work. So those are the 6 things that people want now from a workplace. So are you offering that sort of workplace to your current team members? And is that the sort of thing that people see when you're recruiting? Okay, so those are 6 rules, and as you'll see later on in the webinar, they go through in everything else that you do with your team. So I'm not going to spend more time on this, but we'll come back to this over and over again because you'll see how relevant these are. I just want to quickly check if anyone has any comments or questions about them. I'm not expecting anything at this stage, but I'll just see. Okay, we will come back to these. Okay, so let's look at the next area, and the next area is how do you motivate them? And I'm specifically looking at how do you motivate them without money. So what sort of things motivate your team members now? Now, I should say that money is important. So just saying that money doesn't matter at all is wrong. And Hertzberg has this theory that in any sort of workplace, there are 2 kinds of things. You can break a workplace down into two kinds of factors, and they're called the hygiene factors and the motivators. And hygiene factors are just the basic entry into the door. So this is the price of entry. You've got they're taken for granted in any workplace, and if you don't have them, then you're going to have a dysfunctional workplace. And money is one of them. But things like a clean environment, a safe environment, people who aren't bullying you, those are sort of things that you just have to put in place first before you look at other things. Maybe even simple things like having free coffee, tea and coffee. And then there are the added value things. So these are things like, do you provide free meals, as some of the workplaces like Google and Apple and some of these tech companies do. And then what are the other sort of motivators? So those are things that add value to the workplace after you've taken care of money. So if you go back to that Gallup research, the sort of things that people were looking for a generation ago were very much hygiene factors. So they want good super, they want good benefits, they want good holidays, they want job security. But now, more and more, that's not enough. So what do people want now? And Daniel Pink has written a book called Drive, and he talks about motivation, and he talks about, in his TED Talk, the puzzle of motivation. It's one of the most popular TED Talks. In fact, when I took this photo, it had over 15 million views. And he said, based on research that he looked into, that people are motivated by 3 things broadly. And the 3 things are these: mastery, autonomy, and purpose. So mastery, in other words, having mastery over the work that they do and not feeling like they get stuck all the time. Autonomy, which is something to do with, which has some degree of freedom and independence, and they're doing work that's purposeful and meaningful, not just menial. Now, if you overlay that with the 6 things that the Harvard research showed for the best workplace on earth, that's exactly the same 6 things, or those 6 things match really closely to those 3 things there. So let me be myself is about autonomy. Tell me what's really going on is about helping me get mastery. So these 2 here, discover and magnify my strengths, is allowing me to have mastery. Giving me pride and meaning are to do with purpose. And don't hinder me with stupid rules. That's again about autonomy. So you can see here that all the research is pointing in the same direction. So are you providing those 3 things in your workplace? Are you providing for your team members the ability to get to mastery? Are you providing them the autonomy that they need to be able to work independently? And are you giving them work that's got meaning? So let's do a second poll here. I'm interested to know, in your team, so for your team members, which of these things could you do better? So I've got the 3 options there: mastery, autonomy, and purpose. So let me show the poll now. And again, this is a poll where you can tick more than one. So this is looking at places for improvement, because you may be saying, okay, I'm doing some of these things really well, but in which of these 3 areas could I improve? Okay, so you've got those 3 things there. So you can again tick more than one of the areas in which you think you can actually do better with your team members. So assuming that you've got some control over the environment in which your team works, which of these 3 things are areas for improvement? Okay, so about half the people have voted now. Okay, so we're up to about 2/3. I'll leave the poll open for another 5 seconds. Okay, great. Most people have voted now. Excellent. So let me show you the results. Okay, so there should be a mix, and you'll see that as it comes up. Great. Okay, so interesting. So most people think that their team members, they could give them more opportunities for mastery, which is perfect a lead in, because that's what we're going to talk about next. We're going to talk about accelerating the experience curve, and then the next 2 points. Okay, and lower for autonomy, and but again, half people think that they should give their team members a little bit more of a sense of meaning and purpose. And I know for me, if I was being honest with my team members, well, purpose would be the one that I would rate the highest as what I need to do to give my team members. And especially if you've got team members working independently, as most of us here do on the webinar, then many of them work remotely. They work on a single task. They don't really know where the task fits into the big picture. You may not even see them as part of your team. They may just be a one-off freelancer who does some work, you pay them some money, and that's it. But if you can bring them into your organization and make them feel part of the organization by giving them, showing how their work has meaning and showing what the purpose of it is, in other words, where it fits into the big picture, then you will get better work from them, and they're more likely to be long-term team members. Okay, but mastery is the area that people think is the biggest one. Good. Okay. And I like that, because we're just about to move into it. I don't like the fact that we need to give team members more opportunities for mastery, but I like that there are so many ways to do that now. So let's look at some of those ways. So the third area of the 4 is, how do you fast track learning, or what I call accelerate the experience curve? Because the learning is no longer just about doing training courses and sending people to seminars. There's so many other ways to accelerate the experience curve now. And particularly now in modern teams, as you saw, employees want to know, they want information. They don't want stupid rules to get in the way, and they crave the learning. They love it, but they don't want to just go and sit in a training course for 3 days. In fact, Winston Churchill, I love this quote because it really encapsulates what modern employees want now from their workplaces in terms of learning and development. Winston Churchill, towards the end of the Second World War, when the Americans asked him, what can we do to help Britain? He said, give us the tools and we will finish the job. And that's exactly what your team members are looking for now. So they're looking for the tools, the time, and the permission to accelerate their own experience curve with your help. So a couple of things that I'll share with you here. The first one is this idea of mentoring, and in particular, reverse mentoring. So mentoring is very big. So you should definitely have some sort of mentoring program in place in your organization, whether it's a formal mentoring program or informal mentoring. And my friend and colleague, Anne Rolfe, is absolutely one of the world's leading experts, certainly Australia's leading expert on mentoring. So if you look for Anne Rolfe, Rolfe, if you want to find out more about mentoring, you'll definitely find her resources. But specifically, I also want to talk about reverse mentoring. And the idea of reverse mentoring is that instead of the more senior people mentoring the junior people, it's the other way around. Because the junior people in your organization now have skills and talents and experience and expertise, and they know about things like social media and consumer behavior and things that some of the more senior people would love to know. So set up a mentoring arrangement in reverse. And the Hartford is one company, a financial services company, that does this very well and very effectively, and they find it works really well for everybody. And in the Hartford program, they found that 11 out of the 12 mentors in the program, in the reverse mentoring program, were promoted within a year. Now, remember, the mentors here are the junior people, so mentoring was a fast track for them, but it was also a way for the organization and the senior people in the organization to tap into the intelligence and insights of the more junior people who now do have, they say I matter, and they do have influence and they have insights that the senior people don't. Okay, so that's the first thing, reverse mentoring. Any questions or comments about that? Okay, just Anne Rolfe again. I'll just spell her name. So it's A-N-N, Anne, and then Rolfe, R-O-L-F-E. Okay, the second thing I want to talk about in this area of accelerating the experience curve is just look at online learning. And now there are so many opportunities now for people to do their learning online without having to take time off work to go and attend a training course. Now, I'm not saying that you shouldn't have, that you shouldn't set aside time for this, because people do need time. So even if they go to an online course, they need some prep for the course. So you talk to them beforehand to just get clear about what they want to get from the course, and then you give them time afterwards to integrate the skills they learned into their workplace. However, they don't have to take all the friction of attending a training course goes away. So they don't have to travel to a training venue. They don't have to find parking. In the course, they're not with everybody else who may be working at a different pace from them. So they get really individualized attention. And let's see, there's a question here. Okay, I'll come back to that question. Great. So with online training, you can attend online courses, which sometimes have hundreds of thousands of people doing these courses all at the same time. But you still get the individual attention, because you're not just getting your attention from the lecturer or the trainer or the tutor, you're getting it from all your other people, from all the other people around you, and little study groups form online. There are online forums where people can share their ideas and answer questions. So look at online learning. And the biggest criticism of online learning is the failure rate. And I don't think it's a fair criticism. So my friend Chris recently did one of these massive open online courses about data visualization. And he was in a course with 100,000 other people. And 95% of them dropped out without completing the course. So he was one of the few. He was one of the 5% who succeeded, who completed the course and passed the course. So lots of people point to that 95% failure rate. But remember, this is 100,000 people. So 5,000 students completed the course. Just to put that in perspective, that's the same as the number of people who graduated from IT course in Australian universities in a year. So in a single online course, which just ran over a number of weeks around the world, you had 5,000 students graduating. So don't think about the 95% who dropped out, because it's so easy to just sign up to an online course just to see what it's like and then drop out 2 weeks later. Think about the 5% who actually completed. In fact, I was one of that 95% who signed up for an online course just because I was interested in how it would work. It cost me nothing. In time or money. It just was just setting up an account at one of these online providers, just tried it for a while and then dropped out. However, I did complete a number of courses at this service called opentostudy.com. So if you want to dip your toe into online learning, then this is a really good place to start. So Open to Study is it's free. online learning. It's backed by a number of Australian and New Zealand universities, so it's high quality education. And there are courses on a number of business-oriented topics and non-business oriented as well. So I recommend that if you haven't ever done online courses, this is a really good place to start. I reckon you should try one yourself and then allow your team members to sign up to courses here as well. And when I say allow, it sounds like, what am I saying? Because it costs them nothing. It costs them nothing to actually do it. However, the allowing part and the permission is actually giving them the space to do the training online and then integrate it back into their workplace. So it does involve some work. It's not just as simple as saying, okay, go and do this in your free time. Okay, let me just stop for questions and comments about either reverse mentoring, online courses, or any of the other things we've talked about. Yeah, so John's asked a really interesting question about what about the wisdom of the elders? What about the elders' wisdom? And that comes back to the point of mentoring. So absolutely do mentoring the traditional way. So I'm not in any way saying you should throw out all your mentoring and do only reverse mentoring. What I'm saying is that you should do reverse mentoring and add it to everything else that you do. Anne has some great resources in mentoring in all aspects of mentoring. And I really recommend, if you're interested in finding out more about mentoring, definitely have a look. Just look up Anne Rolfe online and you'll find her just fantastic resources. Also sign up to her webinars. She runs a webinar series like I do, like this webinar series, and her webinars are always really high content, really excellent value. So I highly recommend that. Okay, so let's look at the fourth area, which is about how to achieve more, how to get your team to achieve more. And this is not about productivity. This is not about time management or getting to inbox zero with your email or any of that, or setting goals. This is about how to get more out of your team members. So you may have come across this story a couple of months ago about Dan, the Optus Facebook manager. So Dan is in charge of the Optus Facebook page, and he became famous and got national and international headlines because of the way he handled some racist comments on the Optus Facebook page, and he handled it with humor, with dignity, with respect, with a lot of maturity, and to the extent that people thought he wasn't real. He was just some that there's some sort of social media team that would write Dan's responses, but he was real. And then you can look at, I won't talk much more about him, but look him up, and you can, and that's why I've got this snapshot here. If you search for that article in Google where everyone's talking about Dan from Optus, I'm sure you'll find it. So how do you create more Dans in your team? So people who you trust to be the outward face of your team, of your organization, but also, basically that. You trust them to be the outward face of your organization because they can operate independently and they do it the right way. And I reckon what you're looking for is when people talk about policies and guidelines in the organization, they often talk about them as if they're the same thing. They say, look, here are our policies and guidelines. Here are our policies and guidelines. You have to follow our policies and guidelines. That's glossing over a very, very, very important point. Policies and guidelines are completely different from each other. So policies are things that you have to abide by. They're the fine print. Guidelines are rules of thumb. So the best thing that you can do is create a work environment where you have as few policies as possible and as many guidelines as possible. Guidelines help people do work because it means that they don't have to start from scratch, but they don't hamper people by forcing them to follow the fine print and do everything by the rule book. Now, I know there are times when you absolutely need policies. You need things in place. There are legal requirements. There are health and safety requirements. There are a whole bunch of other things that are mandatory. However, your goal should be to make that part of the work environment as small as possible, and your guidelines, your rules of thumbs, your wikis, your online blogs that describe how work is done, helpful YouTube videos, all of those sort of things, provide them for your team so that that makes their job easier without getting in the way. Remember, number 6 in the list of things that employees want most: don't hinder me with stupid rules. Okay, so this will only work if you've got team members who can use good judgment, because you want people who can use those rules of thumb and those guidelines as a guide, but they know appropriately when they can break the rules or change the guidelines and go outside the normal way of doing things. That's what happened with Dan, the Optus Facebook community manager. the organization had somebody who knew the general guidelines about how to use Facebook, but and if you within Optus, but also was willing to go beyond and just break the rules occasionally, but do it in a way that the organization would be happy with. So here's how you do that. When you look at people in your team, look at whether you're offering them, how much freedom you're offering them, and also how you're building their judgment. So if you do things like mentoring, if you do things like shadowing, if you do things like having case studies that you go through with your team members, if you have debriefs when incidents occur, then all those sort of things are building judgment in your team members. And I reckon there are teams who have people, teams fall into one of these four categories generally. So first of all, they're the really safe teams, or they think they're safe, and they have very tight control, so not much freedom, and their team members, they just give them the basic training that they need to do their job. So they think, okay, well, we can't give you more freedom, so we'll keep it safe, but that's okay because we'll keep a tight rein on things, and that's okay, or it used to be okay. And then what other people do is they hear someone say, okay, you need to give your team members more freedom, so they do that, but they haven't built up the judgment in their team members, so it's very risky. And you've seen examples of people who do silly things on social media because they just they didn't have good judgment. They didn't have wisdom to be able to do the right thing, but they were given the freedom. And that's irresponsible. There are other organizations who go the other way around. So they still keep tight controls. They have very strong policies, and you say you must do things by the book, and yet they still develop their team members' judgment, and that's really wasted. It's wasted their skills, it's wasted time, it's wasted talent, really, because those people are going to leave. So what you want to do is both give people more freedom, but also build up good judgment in their team members. So when I talk at conferences about social media, invariably there's somebody who will come up to me and say, but I can't trust my team members to use social media because they'll do silly things. Well, that's because you haven't built up their judgment. So you're absolutely right. It's a risky thing to do. What you need to do is build up their judgment, and as well as giving them more freedom. If you complete the exit survey at the end of this webinar, I will give you this resource which has 23 ways to get more from your team members by building their judgment. There's also a whole chapter in my book, The Future of Leadership, which is all about building judgment in your team members. Okay, so as we finish up, any questions, comments, feedback about any of this, any of the things that we've covered? Okay, so I'll just keep this open for a little while just to give you the time to ask questions. Okay, so Justice says excellent distinctions. Thank you very much. I see a few more thank yous coming in, so that's really nice. Structuring arrangements with a worldwide team. Yeah, so John, I'm not sure whether that's a comment or something that you're going to do or a question. So if you'd like to just clarify that, I'm happy to answer that. Okay, I've seen lots of very interesting and nice distinctions coming through. While we're doing that, I'll just show you that I do offer these sort of programs for my in my keynote presentations at conferences. So I have one called The Future of Learning, where I look at things like reverse mentoring and online training. I have another one which is all about the future of leadership and how what leaders need to do in our fast-changing world. And the other one, which is about the future of innovation, so how to get the most from your team members and maybe get more than you think that then they can offer. Okay, so let's see. So John says, how is it done, or how difficult is it with a worldwide team? Yeah, it's a really good question, John. So how do you structure a worldwide team? And in fact, I have coming out next week, I think, if you go to my blog at my website, I did a podcast episode recently with my friend Chris Pudney about managing global teams and global teams at work. So it's published on the Out of Office podcast. If you're a subscriber, you probably got it already, but it's also coming out next week in my other podcast, and you can see it on my blog. So John, you can get the answer to that question about worldwide teams there as well. Okay, thank you. There's some other comments coming in, lots of thank yous. So thank you for coming along today. I'd love you to share this webinar series with other people as well. If you do have some feedback for me after the webinar, then go to my website or you can email me. I answer all my emails myself. And also, the next webinar coming up is a really interesting one because this is about thinking differently. I hope I've got you thinking differently about the way that you look at your teams now, today, from today's webinar. And next webinar, the next month's webinar, is I've called this Great Minds Don't Think Alike, and it's very much about different ways of thinking and things that you might need to do differently in our fast changing world now. And especially as leaders to be able to think differently so you can cope with what's happening, what's coming up in the future. So I really hope that you can come to that webinar. It's if you're watching this live, then you don't need to do anything. You'll get the reminders automatically. The date is the 14th of April. And if you're watching the recording of this, then you can go to seeingintothefuture.com and just sign up to the webinar series. I'd love to have you there, and I wish you all the best for this month. I hope you've got some ideas that you can put into practice with your team right now. Thanks, everyone. Bye for now.